Here is what I do to make history more relatable to my students and to get my students to think.
History.
Now I'm actually going to show you what that looks like in my class, but let me break it down for you. The first thing I do is I give students a question that's an easy question in which they can share their opinion. Now I incorporate all this into their notes, but here's an example. Let's say we're talking about the Boston Tea Party. The question I give students, topic's Boston Tea Party, before we actually dive into the material, I'll ask them this question. Is it ever okay to destroy somebody else's property? And then I'll give them about 2 minutes to write an answer. Then they share out. Maybe do pair share, think pair share with their neighbor. Maybe they share out as a class, however you want to do it. But the idea is start to get them thinking because it's an easy question. There's no right or wrong answer. And they start to have opinions about it. Then what you do is you have them share out those opinions. And now the class is warmed up for the material. Now the next thing I do is I share the material. Now, of course, I share the material, I share the information, everything else. But as I'm sharing it, I'm kind of choosing how to portray the events going on. In this case, we're talking about the Boston Tea Party. I portray the Sons of Liberty, the people who actually threw the tea overboard, as heroes, as freedom fighters, right? As all this good things about them. When we talk about how they're trying to fight tyranny and everything else, and all of those things that go along with it. And so I'm going through the events that happened, maybe why they did it, then protests and everything else. And I may even ask questions, man, what do you guys think about these guys? Oh, they're kind of heroes, freedom. And so as I'm going through it, I'm setting the stage to view them as good people. And then step number 3 is I connect it all together. And then here's the beauty of it. The first time I ask the question, is it okay to destroy property? 90% of students are going to say no. So I have students thinking one way. And then I actually maybe inform them or let them know or say, hey, if someone destroys property, see them as good people or bad people? And they would probably say bad people. So I use that first question to set them up to think a certain way. Then I share the information about the Boston Tea Party and I convey that the Sons of Liberty are good people. So I take them the other way. And then I make the connection. I say, well, wait a second. Kind of at the end, I tied it together. I said, now I want you to think about this. If the Sons of Liberty destroyed property, why do you think them as good people if previously you said anybody that destroys property is a bad person? And so what I have the students doing is I have them go from one way belief to another belief. And in the middle of it all, I have them constantly questioning what they think, what their beliefs are. There's something I shared at the very beginning of my class, at the very beginning of the year, I said like this, my goal of this class is to get you to think. And what I want you to think about is this question, do you really believe what you say you believe? And so when I'm teaching my lesson, I'll consciously, I'll purposely, intentionally try to take students from one belief to the other. Believe a certain way, change their view, and maybe change it back again. All along, hopefully they'll start questioning what they really believe. And probably my favorite comment that students make when they go through this whole process, there's 2 comments. One is like, I don't know what to think anymore. I love that comment. And another one is, man, my head hurts. Man, when students make those comments, I know I did the right thing. But let me show you what that might look like as I'm actually doing this on the note. So let's go ahead and go to the screen. So here's our notes. So we got a warm up done. Boom. Now we jump into our notes. I mean, there's a little more to it, transitions, all this stuff, which we'll save for another video. But then I got my notes here. And embedded in my notes is this question. It says, sometimes in the riot, people protest. Okay, you see it. But it says, do you think that's ever okay to destroy somebody else's property? It's what I mentioned before. Now, this course is directions how to do it. I'm telling you, we've done this all year, so students having a good idea how to do it. But then they take 2 minutes, they write this question, and then they answer the question. And then we have that discussion once again, and I'm telling you, 99% of the time, they're like, no, it's not right to destroy someone's property, and I push back. I sure, even if they're doing something wrong, but I get them to buy in that, no, it's not okay. And then the whole notes is about somebody destroying property. And once again, I paint them in good light. So then from there, we go on to our notes, talk about Sons of Liberty, what happened, and everything, and we go through it, right? And so forth, and we talk about, the intolerable acts. But then I pause right there, and I say, do you think this is fair to punish the Sons of Liberty? And they're like, no, because they're good people. But then I tie it back to them. I say, wait a second. How are they good people? Because at the beginning of class, you said it's never okay to destroy property. And then that's when they start going like, well, but it's maybe, well, and that's the part I love. And so what I do is I get students to buy into a certain argument. Then I give them the information, and then I make them change their opinion. I do this no matter what I teach. There's always something like this. I'll give you another example. Here's one. When I was teaching high school, oh, this is my favorite thing in high school. We'd be teaching about the dropping of the atomic bombs. Is it okay? And so we spend the entire time talking about the war. And then I'll ask the question, is it okay to drop the bomb on Japan? And almost, I would say 80% of students are like, yeah, it's okay because, they bombed Pearl Harbor and everything else and everything. So I get them to believe in one way. And then I show them a movie. And that movie is called Barefoot Gen. It's a Japanese animation. And that Japanese animation, it portrays a young Japanese boy and the bomb dropping. It's done very well, the animation and everything else. But in that thing, you get drawn into that character. And you get drawn into Jen, and you feel the pain it must have felt like to be a civilian back then. And then at the end of the movie, some kids are actually crying. And I asked the question again, was it okay to drop the bomb in Japan? And then 80% of the kids say, no way, it's horrible. Look at the suffering. Jen, even though it was an anime, they're like, no way. And then I bring that thing, well, if we didn't drop the bomb, what could we have done? We would have to attack and then all these deaths. And by the time they're done, they're like split. They're like, I have no idea what to believe. That is what I'm going for. And so I have numerous examples like this all the time. Another one regarding taxation. No taxation without representation. I use the example of the French and Indian War, and I pose the question, if your friend got hurt protecting you, would you feel obligated to pay for the medical bills? And of course, students have a certain opinion about that. And I talk about the French and Indian War, and that's what Britain was doing, but yet we were upset at them, and so forth. So when I teach history, what I do once again is I try to make it meaningful by starting with a easy question. It's kind of an opinion, but then from there, we dive into material, and hopefully by getting them to change their mind several times, it really gets them to think.